But I would like to read for you a bit of the affidavit of the charges, the allegations against Mr. Darrell Brooks up in Waukesha, Wisconsin, who is alleged to have driven his Ford Escape through a crowd of people at a Christmas parade, to include a priest, parishioners, and even Catholic school kids. So this is the affidavit. I saw it being posted yesterday on Andy Now's Twitter feed, and I got a copy of some of the relevant parts, and I want to read them to you. And this was, I watched the judge yesterday going through some of this information and just astounded at the criminal history of this particular suspect. The fact that he's had two so light bails, $1,000 the last bail. He is alleged to have used his car to attempt to kill his child's mother recently, out on bail for that, and in particular, $1,000 bail. And they levied a $5 million bail against him for this due to the severity, the seriousness, how many victims. I mean, the sixth victim is now deceased, a child, in fact. It's pretty insane. So here's a little bit from this affidavit. At approximately 4:35 p.m., Detective Casey heard via the Waukesha police radio that reserve officer was informed by a citizen that two people were fighting in the area of White Rock School. Squads were sent to that area to further investigate. A few minutes later, Detective Casey heard a horn honking from an area north of his location. Detective Casey went out onto White Rock Avenue to see where the horn sound was coming from. He observed that White Rock Avenue was filled with parade participants, as was East Main Street. He began to see people spreading apart and observed a red Ford Escape driving southbound on White Rock Avenue. He observed people jumping out of the way of the red Ford Escape. As the Ford Escape was at White Rock Avenue and East Main Street, Detective Casey stepped in front of the Ford Escape and pounded on the hood of the vehicle and yelled multiple times, "Stop." Detective Casey was wearing a shirt with patches on both shoulders that stated Waukesha Police, as well as wearing a black hat with white letters on the front of it which read Police. Further, he was wearing a neon orange safety vest that stated Police on the front of it and back of it. The Ford Escape continued driving and turned westbound on East Main Street. At that time, the vehicle was driving at a slow speed, and the vehicle brushed Detective Casey back off the front of the car, causing him to be positioned down the driver's side of the vehicle. Detective Casey went to the driver's side of the window and pounded on the driver's side door, yelling, "Stop." Detective Casey subsequently positively identified the driver of the Ford Escape as Darrell E. Brooks, Jr., date of birth 2/21/82, hereafter referred to as the defendant. The defendant drove past Detective Casey and into the parade procession. Detective Casey chased the vehicle to East Ave on foot, and he observed the vehicle begin to drive faster. Detective Casey broadcast over the radio that the red Ford Escape had entered the parade route, and he needed squads to respond in an emergency fashion. A few seconds later, Detective Casey heard on the police radio that the vehicle was striking people and was continuing westbound on East Main Street. I'm going to skip just a little bit to keep it kind of pertinent here. It says, Detective Casey later observed 3 adult victims in the road on East Main Street. These victims were subsequently identified as Victim A, B, C. All 3 of these victims had traumatic injuries as a result of being hit by the vehicle the defendant was driving, and all 3 subsequently pronounced dead. Victim D, an adult, was transported to Waukesha Memorial Hospital, and she subsequently died as a result of the injuries she sustained as a result of being struck by the defendant's vehicle. Victim E, an adult, was transported to Aurora Summit, and he subsequently died as a result of the injuries he sustained as a result of being struck by the defendant's vehicle. I'm going to skip down to Officer Buttrin. Officer Buttrin was assisting with crowd control in the area of East Main Street and Northeast Avenue. At approximately 4:38 p.m., Officer Buttrin heard on his radio that a car was traveling westbound. Approaching the parade route, Officer Buttrin observed a red Ford Escape traveling westbound on White Rock Ave, approaching East Main Street. He began walking onto East Main Street into the parade in an attempt to get the driver's attention, stop the vehicle, and redirect the vehicle from the parade route. The vehicle turned right onto East Main Street toward Officer Buttrin. As the vehicle was traveling westbound on East Main Street, Officer Buttrin was standing directly in line with the vehicle, wearing a full City of Waukesha Police Department uniform. He put his hands up and yelled, "Stop the vehicle," multiple times. Officer Buttrin estimated the vehicle's speed to be approximately 25 miles per hour. The vehicle was initially sticking to the north side of the road in the open lane between the parade participants and spectators. Officer Buttrin observed the driver looking straight ahead, directly at him, and it appeared he had no emotion on his face. As the vehicle passed his location, Officer Buttrin continually yelled for the vehicle to stop. The vehicle continued traveling westbound on East Main Street and passed through the intersection of East Main Street and Buckley Street. Officer Buttrin concluded that if the driver was lost and attempting to get out of the parade, this would have been a reasonable location for him to stop and exit the parade route. The vehicle continued westbound on East Main Street and was honking its horn. As the vehicle got to approximately Martin Street, it appeared to Officer Buttrin that the vehicle began to increase its speed. As the vehicle was traveling westbound, the vehicle began getting closer to parade spectators and almost struck a small juvenile who was standing in one of the parking stalls on the north side of the road as its speed was increasing. The vehicle then got into the intersection of East Main Street and Northwest Barstow Street, and it appeared the brakes were activated. Officer Buttrin believed the vehicle was going to come to a stop and attempt to make a right-hand turn out of the parade route onto Northwest Barstow Street. However, the vehicle then appeared to rapidly accelerate. As Officer Buttrin heard tires squeal, the vehicle took an abrupt left turn into the crowd of parade participants. At this point, it was clear to Officer Buttrin that this was an intentional act to strike and hurt as many people as possible. Officer Buttrin continued to run westbound on East Main Street, trailing the vehicle and its path. He observed the vehicle appeared to be intentionally moving side to side, striking multiple people, and bodies and objects were flying from the area of the vehicle. As Officer Buttrin got to the area of the Subway restaurant on East Main Street, Officer Buttrin began to encounter multiple casualties. Multiple people were pulling at him, saying that they needed assistance with injured parties. Based on the ongoing threat of the vehicle and the occupant, Officer Buttrin asked those assisting with the casualties as he passed if they were breathing and advised them to stay with them and that ambulances were on the way. Officer Buttrin continued to chase after the vehicle on foot in order to stop the threat the driver posed. Detective Casey spoke with Officer Scholten, who indicated that he saw the Ford Escape traveling southbound on West Main Street, approaching Wisconsin Avenue, running over people. Officer Scholten shot at the vehicle 3 times, striking it 3 times. Detective Tersoni spoke with multiple witnesses who were present during the parade. One witness indicated, quote, "As I continued to watch the SUV, it continued to drive in a zigzag motion. It was like the SUV was trying to avoid vehicles, not people. There was no attempt made by the vehicle to stop, much less slow down," unquote. Detective Tersoni spoke with another witness who described the same zigzag driving pattern by the SUV, and the witness further indicated he felt it was, quote, "a direct intent to hit as many parade participants," unquote. Based on the foregoing complaint, the complainant believes this complaint to be true and correct. That is pretty crazy. Pretty crazy detail from this affidavit of the arraignment of Mr. Brooks, alleged to have been the driver. I don't know if you saw this yesterday or not. Adrian, you can take that desktop down. I don't know if you saw the video or not, but there was doorbell video footage of Mr. Brooks knocking on someone's door, begging to be let in, claiming to be a homeless person, saying they were looking for an Uber. They're called an Uber. They don't know where they're going to meet. This person lets Mr. Brooks into his house, not knowing who he is or what his deal is, thinking he was just a homeless guy who needed help, makes the guy a sandwich. And then he looks out the window and he sees the police cars are coming down the street and something is up. And then this guy's like, listen, I don't know who you are. I think you've got to go. The guy goes out of the house. He's coming back. This is all on doorbell footage. You can probably go to YouTube and find it there. And he is banging on this gentleman's door again, begging to be let back in, claiming that he left his ID card inside. The police see Mr. Brooks on this man's porch and they arrest him there. Guns drawn. It's pretty crazy footage. And it's a more insane thing to think that somebody, for whatever reason, even the judge points out, if you watch the video yesterday of his arraignment yesterday, the judge even says, I have no idea of the motivation. He even says, I'm not even entitled to know what the motivation or the intent is here. A lot of people are speculating today that Mr. Brooks had sympathies for the BLM movement and was acting in that way. I don't know. It's all alleged until proven otherwise. We have no idea what's going on here or why he did this, but according to this affidavit, it does look incredibly intentional. And as Officer Casey had an eye-to-eye contact with this individual, he was positively identified. Let's pray for God's justice, healing, and forgiveness in this situation. We don't want race wars in our country. That needs to be prevented. We'll be right back. More breaking news and stories is coming up next.